This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ethiopia notifies Egypt and Sudan that it has begun the second phase of filling its Grand Renaissance Dam. Leaders of political parties across the world set for a virtual summit to be addressed by Chinese President Xi Jinping. And we'll look at the impact, production, and distribution of China's Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine in Africa. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq seek to pump crude from Baghdad to Cairo through Amman. And we'll look at how Uganda is coping with a challenge presented by different variants of COVID-19. We'll begin the hour in Ethiopia, where the country has begun the second phase of filling the Grand Renaissance Dam. According to the Ministry of Water, the filling is being held as per the original plan of the mega dam's construction. The ministry further says that the country officially notified Egypt and Sudan about the new developments. However, Egypt has rejected this unilateral move. Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia are yet to agree on a legally binding deal on the filling and operation of the dam. The issue is set to be discussed on Thursday with the UN Security Council. Well, let's get more on that developing story. Giram Chala joins me from Addis Ababa, and Adel Maruchi is live for us from Cairo. We're going to begin in Cairo with Adel. Adel, how is this development being received by Egypt, and more than that, how is it likely to impact negotiations around the Nile Dam project?
Well, Hannah, the negotiations have not been going well at all from the Egyptian and the Sudanese perspective. They were stumbling, and they failed to reach a final legal binding agreement between the three nations, something that Egypt and Sudan have been persisting and trying to push forward for, to have a document that gives abidance of all three parties to a certain set of regulations that all three countries want. So how will this impact? It definitely won't make it better because now Ethiopia proceeds with the second filling of its reservoir, which is expected to be much bigger in terms of water volume to be reserved behind the dam, and therefore hindered from the flow in the Nile River to Sudan and to Egypt. In response to the official letter that the Egyptian irrigation minister received from his Ethiopian counterpart, Egypt officially rejected Ethiopia's move, describing it as a unilateral move. And on the other side, the Egyptian foreign minister has also forwarded this Egyptian official rejections to the UN Security Council, and already there is a scheduled session this coming Thursday, which Sudan and Egypt both have been calling for to discuss the developments in the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance and Nile water talks with Ethiopia.
Giram, let's come to you in Addis. Ethiopia is saying that it has begun the second phase of filling its Grand Renaissance Dam on the Nile. What more can you tell us about this, Giram, and the timing of the decision as well?
Anna, let's begin with your final question. The timing. The timing is depicted through two important things. One, it is a rainy season, the wet season in Ethiopia at the moment. A lot of rain is coming, so it is a favorable condition for the country to proceed and fill the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam for the second time. And the other issue, the most important issue, is this is a schedule that the three countries agreed upon when it comes to filling the dam. And last time it was filled, it was almost in the same time frame. And this time around, it's going to be, by the way, holding 13.5 billion cubic meters of water on the dam itself, the reservoir. And generally, the cumulative water that is going to be kept in the reservoir of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will be more than 18 billion cubic meters of water. So for Ethiopia, it is about time. For Ethiopia, it's also about making this Grand Renaissance Dam start power generation. That's the ultimate goal. Also provide electricity, not only for itself, but also for the region including other countries far away from the region. So it is about time, and that's what's happening according to authorities, by the way.
And Giram, just fill us in on what more you can tell us about the second phase of filling now that it's begun, and that Ethiopia is saying that it has notified Egypt and Sudan about its intention to continue filling the Grand Renaissance Dam. Is this an indication that there will be no further discussions about the dam going forward?
Absolutely not, Anna. In fact, this is going to open more doors for discussion. I've been trying to speak to the Ethiopian Water, Irrigation and Energy Ministry officials there, people who've been part of the negotiation process have been telling us that, look, Ethiopia has been open for negotiation. Ethiopia is the one in the first place, even at this round, who officially pronounced the resuming of the filling of the Grand Renaissance Dam for the second time. And the official communication has been made for Egyptian authorities and Sudanese authorities at the same time. So at this moment in time, this is all about development. Ethiopia has been saying time and again that there is no reason why we have to affect Egypt or Sudan. This water should be shared amongst ourselves, but a colonial era agreement that is going to allow only Egypt or Sudan to use this water, Ethiopia sideline, is not going to be accepted. Ethiopia is determined to finish it, but when it does, that it's not going to affect any country in the process. Now it is ready to talk, and any binding agreement should not prevent the nation from further using of the water, not only the Grand Renaissance Dam, but the negotiation should be all-inclusive, fair, and practical at the same time. So negotiations can continue. Ethiopian authorities are saying they are ready anytime, anywhere.
Now let's come back to you in Cairo. What options remain available to Egypt given the actions of Ethiopia on its Nile Dam operations?
Well, as long as Ethiopia keeps moving on its own plans without getting Egypt and Sudan to approve, it doesn't seem that Egypt and Sudan have much options. Now, there is a meeting happening in the Security Council this Thursday, and what other options will be there after that, it is still not clear. Egypt and Sudan have resorted to the African Union, which sponsor talks have not reached any agreement that pleases both countries. There have been international mediation. The United States has entered. Negotiators from Europe as well have participated, and still nothing has been achieved, which has led also to some officials from the White House to criticize the Ethiopian stance. So what is next is basically, from a Sudanese perspective, for example, they say that they have all options on the table. Egypt, on the other hand, believes that politics is the only way out from it, but this has not been helping for some time, but definitely the next Security Council meeting will shape more the vision about what the international community is willing to do, or how it would like to intervene in this diplomatic crisis, and in turn will also dictate what will Egypt and Sudan will have in reaction to that.
Thank you so much for all that. Adil Maruchi speaking to us from Cairo, and Giram Chala speaking to us from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Well, meanwhile, the Ethiopian government says despite pressure from some nations, it has accomplished its law enforcement mission in Tigray, delivered aid, and unilaterally declared a ceasefire. Addressing the nation's parliament, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said that the results of the government's decisions on Tigray will give time for stakeholders in the war to consider peace. Here's CGTN's Giram Chala with more.
Answering questions to the outgoing MPs, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said despite the false narrative of the army left because it was defeated, the decision to leave Tigray was made to give the people there and others time for reflection.
The truth of the matter is, it's a must to give time for reflection, especially for our people in Tigray. We have to allow farmers to do their work, and we must not be the reason to prevent that activity. We should not be blamed for human rights abuses anymore. We have done lots of positive things in Tigray, including the training, arming, and assignment of a police force there. The army is not city police and has its own missions, and that is concluded for now. We've decided it cannot be fatigued. We will see what will be the result of this decision sooner than later.
Abiy said some in the international community were unfair to Ethiopia and even tried to sabotage the constitutional order and the leadership of the country, aiming at a regime change.
We won't be walking on the road others paved for us. We know some nations have attempted a regime change. Our message for such a nation is, as long as Ethiopia stands still, the issue of individuals holding power is secondary to us. Instead of being a mercenary government, we 100% choose to face whatever challenge comes our way. But that has no benefits. The people of Ethiopia have already expressed their desire.
The Prime Minister and the Parliament as a whole applauded what they called a remarkable job done by the Ethiopian National Defense Force. Abiy promised the army can still deliver on any front.
Ethiopian Defense Forces may not have F-22s. An army that can do information warfare may not be equipped with the latest GPS technology, may not have Su-35 or Rafale fighter jets, or the latest missiles or nuclear bombs. But one thing I can tell you for a fact is that the kind of bravery the Ethiopian army has, no one else has. That's a fact.
TPLF in Tigray has reportedly put 7 preconditions to be fulfilled before any peace talks can begin. Budget release, electricity and network services provision, and the release of prisoners are among them. Addis Ababa so far has officially said nothing on this, but some authorities said what Ethiopia calls a terrorist group must first respect the constitution of the land before expecting anything from the government. Group Tala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The EU's Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell will late on Tuesday, the 6th of July, take part in a debate with European lawmakers about the situation in Ethiopia's conflict-hit northern region of Tigray. We're now joined by Tony Waterman, who is standing by for us in Brussels. Hi, Tony. So good to have you on the program. Tony, what should we expect to dominate the EU lawmakers' discussions later on today?
Well, Hannah, I think the top thing they're going to be discussing is the humanitarian crisis, which is gripping the Tigray region at the moment. Some 1.7 million people have been displaced in this conflict, which has been raging, as you know, since November. Also, 400,000 people in famine-like conditions. That's according to the aid agencies, but by the United States estimations, that could actually be 900,000 civilians in famine-like situations. So the concern really is that these routes that are bringing in the humanitarian aid are being intentionally blocked or destroyed. There was, of course, that bridge which was destroyed just a couple of days ago, which was a main entry point for humanitarian aid into the region of about 6 million people. There is a blame game going on right now over who is responsible for that destruction. But this is really a big concern for European lawmakers and also the heads of the institutions in the region. And this is why we're seeing this debate taking place later this afternoon. There was, of course, also last week 3 individuals with Doctors Without Borders who were found murdered. One of them a Spanish national, so we can expect that that is also going to be included in the conversation that is going to be taking place. And just a couple of weeks ago, we heard from the European envoy to Ethiopia saying that he had a conversation with the government saying in February, and allegedly the government saying that they wanted to wipe out the Tigrayan population for the next 100 years. Of course, that has been denied by the government. So there are a lot of issues that are at play here. The EU has been watching this situation very, very closely, but top of mind right now is really this humanitarian crisis taking place.
And Tony, you've been following this story very closely for a while now. When you look at it, when you observe what's happening and speaking to everybody that is at Brussels, some of the key influential people in this debate, what is the ultimate aim of the EU debate about Ethiopia, and are the discussions likely to influence policy decisions?
Well, again, this is something that has been watched very, very closely over the last 8 months. Even before then, Joseph Borrell, who's going to be leading this discussion taking place this afternoon, called it an absolute atrocity, appalling what is taking place in that region right now. Some would argue, though, that the EU has been rather slow to act on this crisis. They did not send any election observers when the election took place a couple of weeks ago. That is seen by a mistake by some corners corners of Europe. The ultimate aim here, though, is for some sort of lasting peace in the region. They have floated this idea of perhaps sanctioning the Ethiopian government over what's taking place right now. This is going to be something that is going to be discussed at a Foreign Affairs Council meeting, which is taking place next week. And you may remember that back in March, the European Commission sanctioned Eritrea over alleged human rights atrocities that were taking place after the UN said that they were behind some violence that was taking place in the region. So this is very top of mind here, but the ultimate goal is for this ceasefire to be a lasting ceasefire, for it to be fully implemented on both sides here, and for there to be lasting peace in the region. And for Europe, the role that they can play is really one that's diplomatic, trying to have conversations with both sides, and potentially, if that doesn't work, then implementing sanctions, things like asset freezes and travel bans.
Thank you so much for all that. Tony Waterman speaking to us from Brussels. Let's head over to Libya now, where the latest round of talks on Libya's elections has failed to reach an agreement. The week-long talks based outside Geneva discussed the constitutional foundation for holding the December elections. However, Libyan delegates were divided on election procedure and whether to delay the election. Here's Adel Emrouhi with more.
On June 26, members of the UN-backed Libyan Political Dialogue Forum concluded a 3-day virtual discussion about the constitutional basis for holding their December elections. After failing to reach an agreement, they requested a face-to-face meeting, which the UN hosted last week near Geneva. 4 days of heated debates stretched into a 5th day. Yet still, many members rejected the advisory committee's proposal for the elections.
There are 6 main points of difference around the constitutional foundation. I believe it is very difficult to overcome that without compromise. The advisory committee discussed some suggestions for that, but it also added new issues that were not on the table, and that complicated the main talks.
During the latest constitutional talks, the UN support mission in Libya opened room for modifications to the political roadmap. Libyan participants put forward ideas like delaying the presidential election or replacing it with a referendum vote on the table. The talks failed to reach consensus, yet some experts say there is still hope for Libya.
There is a conflict of interest for those factions that have become in a controlling position inside the forum. That has hindered our progress towards enriching the democratic process and bring the people closer to the ballot boxes. There are now clear threats to resort to arms in case some refuse to hold the elections in their own way.
The failure of the Geneva talks brought criticism over the UN mission's facilitation of the forum. Its 75 members are meant to represent all segments of Libyan society. Critics say that instead, the UN gave more weight to rival politicians and parties directly involved in the crisis, which may be one of the reasons talks are failing.
This is a dangerous sign, but we must also realize that involved nations like Egypt are the ones more concerned with the Libyan crisis. I don't think anyone wants to reignite the Libyan scene, so they'll be concerned with pushing Libyans to agreement.
A combined 8 days of talks over the legal foundation for the Libyan elections have ended in vain. More negotiations are now scheduled to revive hope for these constitutional talks. Libyan representatives will now have to consume more time to discuss what has become a much more complicated topic. Libya, however, cannot waste more time if it is to hold these elections as scheduled on December 24. Adel Emrouhi, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news, including leaders of political parties across the world set for a virtual summit to be addressed by Chinese President Xi Jinping. And we look at the impact, production and distribution of China's Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine in Africa.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Chinese President Xi Jinping has held a video summit with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. President Xi called on China and the European Union to expand consensus, cooperate, and seek common ground. Li Jingyi has more.
Chinese President Xi Jinping stressed to France's Emmanuel Macron and Germany's Angela Merkel the world's need for mutual respect and cooperation, not suspicion and a zero-sum game. President Xi said China favors holding the 25th China-EU leaders meeting at an early date. China also wants high-level talks covering strategy, trade, culture, digital, and climate change. The president underlined the importance of safeguarding real multilateralism. He said the international system and the UN Charter, as well as norms of international relations, must be upheld. International affairs should be addressed by all parties through consultations. President Xi also called for building a major country relationship that is stable and balanced. He hopes the EU will demonstrate strategic independence.
China's greatest hope is to develop itself rather than replace others. The Belt and Road Initiative put forward by China is to create more opportunities for common development. We hope the European side can play a more positive role in global affairs and jointly safeguard world peace, stability, development and prosperity.
Both Macron and Merkel joined President Xi's pledge to expand cooperation and consensus between China and the EU. Macron said France welcomes China's enterprises to invest in France and is willing to communicate with China on climate change and biodiversity. Merkel said Germany will increase cooperation with China on fair distribution of vaccines and improving trade. And she said Germany hopes the EU-China investment agreement will be approved as soon as possible. The leaders also discussed issues covering Africa, Iran's nuclear situation, Afghanistan, and Myanmar. In April, the three leaders held a climate summit via video link. On the agenda was cooperation in addressing climate change and China-Europe relations. Li Jingyi, CGTN.
More than 500 leaders of the world's political parties are to meet online on Tuesday in a summit. Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, or CPC, is expected to deliver a speech. Organizers hope the CPC and world political parties summit can help more people better understand China and its ruling party. CGTN Sun Ye has more.
The summit will focus on a collective goal for the world's political parties, working for people's well-being. And coming on the heel of July the 1st, when the Communist Party of China marked its 100th anniversary of founding, organizers say the meeting will be addressing fundamental changes in how the world views and understands the CPC, which now has over 95 million party members.
Political parties around the world have now turned to focus on the systematic success of the CPC, and parties around the world have turned to focus on what China's achievements over the years mean to the world.
Guo says the summit will also work to form a consensus among the attending global parties and organizations on possible ways to address global problems and to prepare the world for new realities.
The summit will address the changing times and meet various expectations by political parties around the world. We hope the international community can better understand China and the CPC, adjust to the development and rise of China more quickly. This can bring about greater understanding, support, and company along the way.
More than 10,000 people from different political parties from across the world will be attending through video link, and over 100 diplomatic envoys will be attending the summit in person in Beijing. Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, later on Tuesday, July 6th, we'll bring you live coverage of the video conference at the World Political Parties Summit, where Chinese President Xi Jinping will deliver a keynote speech. Stay tuned to CGTN for that live broadcast. Let's head over to South Africa now, where there's been mixed reaction to the approval of China's Sinovac jab. Health authorities have welcomed the move, but medical experts have urged caution with limited data available on the vaccine's effectiveness against variants circulating locally. Johnson & Johnson as well as Pfizer have so far been the only vaccines registered for use. South Africa is now looking to include other vaccines as it races to inoculate its population. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
The approval of China's Sinovac for emergency use in South Africa has been applauded as a turning point in its vaccine rollout. There's an urgency to get more vaccines as infections soar in a relentless third wave. But medical experts have warned against using vaccines that haven't yet been properly tested.
There's not enough data on Sinovac regarding our beta variant. For now, we know the Delta variant is the most prominent variant out there in South Africa. We need those data on Sinovac regarding our beta variant. Also, if we look at countries where Sinovac has already been used, countries like Chile and Seychelles, we need to look at what happened there and what are their reinfection rate.
South Africa's coronavirus cases have surpassed 2 million and the numbers are still climbing. Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson's are the only two vaccines that have been used so far.
From the point of view that you have 3 vaccines, it can become quite difficult going forward with the rollout. There's also 2 dosages between 14 and 28 days apart. It's got different storage requirements than your Pfizer and your Johnson & Johnson. And again, that might be a problem with some of the sites.
Vaccines are continuing to roll into the country, but they might be too little to stem the latest tide of infections.
We don't expect that the vaccines currently would protect us from the third wave itself from a population perspective. It might protect the individual who gets the vaccine, but that individual also still needs full vaccination for protected and have the benefit of the vaccine.
Just 5% of 60 million people have been vaccinated so far. The program is being stepped up with Johnson & Johnson's and Pfizer, but it's still too early to tell how soon Sinovac will arrive in the country and how much South Africa will acquire. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli has announced the production of the first 1 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines. He also visited the factory where the government vaccination arm is manufacturing the Chinese COVID-19 vaccine created by Sinovac. Here's Adel Emrouhi with that report.
Egypt takes a closer step towards officially releasing its domestically produced COVID-19 vaccine. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli announced a 50% completion of the nation's first 2 million doses of the Chinese Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine. The nation now awaits the final testing for the authorization of the new vaccine from the Egyptian Drug Authority.
The magnitude of demand on the COVID-19 vaccines is immense. That made some of the companies we've contracted to suppliers of the vaccines to be behind schedule. From day one, we eyed acquiring the ability of manufacturing the vaccine so that we won't be under any mercy of the global market. In that regard, I would like to thank the great friends, the People's Republic of China, for its full support in this domestic manufacturing.
The government vaccination arm, Vaxera, is currently producing the COVID-19 jab in Cairo. Its production line has the capacity of producing 300,000 doses daily. Egypt is currently in negotiations with the Chinese pharmaceutical company Sinovac Biotech to supply double the contracted volume of the raw biomaterial needed for manufacturing. Madbouli says his government aims to produce 80 million doses of the vaccine before the year ends, instead of the initial plan of 40 million.
We're not expecting this virus to vanish anytime soon. We must have the ability to manufacture because it is likely we will need to keep vaccinating citizens on an annual basis. This will provide a shield against recurrent infections from that disease. We're finalizing another manufacturing facility for Vaxera, which will be more of a pharmaceutical city that has a great ability to produce medicine and vaccines.
Once completed, the new Vaxera complex will be able to add 3 million doses to Egypt's daily capacity to produce all kinds of vaccines. The agreement with China includes full transfer of technology for producing COVID-19 vaccines. That will include producing the raw biomaterial domestically in Egypt.
The beginning of local production of COVID-19 vaccines is a huge relief to the country. The nation's vaccination program has somewhat slowed down because of the global interruption in vaccine supply. This domestic achievement will help Egypt in its plan to vaccinate all education staff and at least 5 million students within the next 2 months before the new school year begins. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Uganda's Ministry of Health says different variants of COVID-19 have been responsible for a surge in critical cases in recent weeks. The country is going through a severe second wave with hospital admissions hitting 120 people per day. The majority of them younger people. CGTN's Isabel Nakira has that report.
39-year-old Aaron Nsamba was diagnosed with COVID-19 a month ago. Though well now, he's been advised by doctors to blow a balloon to exercise his lungs. Aaron suffered from chest pain and breathing difficulties 3 days after being diagnosed. He was immediately taken into ICU in a private facility in Kampala.
Did the X-ray and told me your lungs are depleted. You're too much, as in you have so much mucus. You have to do. There's a thing he put on me to suck out some of the mucus. That was a variable. Okay, I don't know how they do it, what he did, but he put on something and it helped really.
Aaron was put on oxygen therapy for 5 days, consuming a cylinder of oxygen each day. He feared the hospital would run out of oxygen with health facilities under severe pressure.
Morning comes, the doctor comes in, looks at me, runs out. Goes, calls a friend, they come. Look at the things, look at the data, they run out. Like, what is wrong? Then one of them gets the courage and says, Aaron, I think we are losing you.
Aaron is among hundreds of younger people in Uganda who have been severely affected by the coronavirus during this new wave. Public hospitals are struggling to cope with about 1,000 seriously ill patients. Desperate patients with no options are running to the private facilities, which not many can afford. The Ministry of Health has also recorded 5 different variants of the coronavirus in Uganda. The most common is the Delta variant, first detected in India.
From our observations, we have noted increased transmissibility, resulting in a fast-moving outbreak, more severe clinical presentations of new cases, and unfortunately resulting in poor clinical outcomes.
Public health officials say the majority of the cases are in people under the age of 40. In the previous wave, the elderly were most affected. The country is back in a strict lockdown. Authorities said tighter restrictions become necessary after many businesses are operating illegally. The government now admits it's been caught unprepared to equip public hospitals with oxygen and ICU beds.
Because as of now, we are making for 200 patients. But when your numbers continue increasing, we will not have the oxygen to meet the demand of the 900 bed capacity that we have here.
Some private companies are supporting the public hospitals by providing free oxygen. Uganda has vaccinated just 0.1% of its population and has a limited supply of vaccines. Aaron was lucky to get treatment in a private facility, but other Ugandans face a limited capacity of oxygen and ICU beds in public hospitals. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, let's recap on the hour's top stories. Ethiopia has begun the second phase of filling the Grand Renaissance Dam. According to the Ministry of Water, the filling is being held as per the original plan of the mega dam's construction. The ministry further says that the country officially notified Egypt and Sudan about the new developments. However, Egypt has rejected this unilateral move. Meanwhile, the Ethiopian government says despite pressure from some nations, it has accomplished its law enforcement mission in Tigray, delivered aid and unilaterally declared a ceasefire. Addressing the nation's parliament, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said that the results of his government's decisions in Tigray would give time for stakeholders in the war to consider peace. And finally, Chinese President Xi Jinping has held a video summit with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. President Xi called on China and the European Union to expand consensus, cooperate, and seek common ground. And that was a recap of our hour's top story. Let's now take a short break and return your business news, including Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq seek to pump crude from Baghdad to Cairo through Amman.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Time now for the business news. Officials from Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq are planning to revive an oil pipeline that will pump crude from Baghdad to Cairo through Amman. In return, Egypt will export some of its excess electricity to the two countries that are facing acute power shortages. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more details from Cairo.
After a successful trilateral summit held between Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq last week, officials announced plans to revive a project that was mooted in 2013 to trade oil in return for electricity between the three Middle Eastern states. The ambitious project will see Iraq export oil to Egypt via Jordan by making use of the capabilities of these countries.
Iraq is one of the largest oil producers worldwide and is a key member of OPEC. It produces 3.6 million barrels per day of crude oil. Meanwhile, Egypt has several refining facilities that can import the Iraqi oil, refine it into petroleum products for the local market, and re-export around the world. There are several facilities like Midor, and Egypt is working on opening new petrochemical companies and refining facilities soon.
تستطيع طبعا انها تكرر النفط العراقي.
A 1,700-kilometer pipeline will be built to send oil from Iraq to Jordan. It will then be transported to Egypt through Jordan's Aqaba Special Economic Zone Authority.
مدينة العقبة كمنطقة اقتصادية خاصة.
The Aqaba city, as a special economic zone, is looking forward to this project for its social and development aspects. It will increase activities and create specialized job opportunities for the citizens in the city and its suburbs. For this project, Aqaba is considered the main backbone that will ensure its success and sustainability.
In return for oil, Egypt plans to export electricity to the two Arab nations that face electricity shortages.
Iraq is suffering from a huge electricity problem and there is a deficit of about 7,000 megawatts. Egypt, on the other hand, has a 25% surplus of electricity production that could reach 60,000 megawatts and will be exported to provide badly needed electricity to Iraq and Jordan at low cost. There is already an electricity line linking Egypt with Jordan, but authorities will need to establish a larger extension from Jordan to also cover the needs of Iraq as well.
No concrete date has been set yet for the project that has been postponed several times in the past due to political instability in the region. Experts, however, believe it can be operational from 2022. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The Chinese-built Ethiopia-Djibouti standard gauge railway has transported a total of 3.5 million tons of goods over the last 3 years. The cross-border rail connecting Ethiopia with its neighbor Djibouti is said to be the key to economic transformation for the countries and beyond. Here's CGTN's Gurum Chala with more.
The Ethiopia-Djibouti electrified rail, which connects landlocked Ethiopia to Djibouti port, has been improving its efficiency by 25 to 30% every year since it went operational in October 2015. That is according to official reports. The railway transported 800,000 tons of commodities in the first year of operation and then increased its capacity to 1.2 million and 1.45 million tons in the next 2 successive years. And it has mainly transported machinery, vehicles, fertilizers, commercial goods and commodities imported by the private sector operators and the Ethiopian Shipping and Logistic Services Enterprise. By the way, this multi-billion-dollar cross-country railway project was financed 70% by the soft loan found from the Exim Bank of China and was constructed by the China state companies CREC and CCECC. Reports suggest that the electrified transnational railway earned $29 million in 9 months. The Ethiopia-Djibouti Railway currently provides different kinds of freight services, including the transportation of perishable goods, vehicles, cereals and fertilizers, as well as transportation of passengers, service which began in October 2016. Gurum Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Authorities in Tunisia have inaugurated a center that is dedicated to the economic and social reintegration of migrants returning to the country. Officials say the program will allow Tunisians who have chosen to voluntarily return home to build their capacity ahead of integration into the labor market. CGTN's Adnan Shuashi tells us more.
Tunisna, as the space is known, was inaugurated by the Social Affairs Minister to help the social and economic reintegration of migrants voluntarily returning to Tunisia.
The state will offer help and assistance to Tunisian migrants who have chosen to return after migrating illegally to Europe. Several specialized experts have been posted at the host center and will orient and support the migrants with training, guidance and counseling until they can find a job or launch a business to resume a normal life.
Authorities pointed out that the host center will not, however, open the door for any migrants that will be forcefully repatriated to country.
Our services make sure that returning migrants are the ones who took the decisions so that it does not become forced repatriation or organized expulsion. We agreed with their European partners that we will only admit Tunisian migrants that return voluntarily. We need to protect the migrants' rights.
The main center is located at the headquarters of the Office of Tunisians Abroad in the capital city Tunis. In addition, 8 similar structures will be operational in the governorates of Bizerte, Kef, Qirwan, Monastir, Sfax, Kafsa, Tatawin and Mednin.
This new structure will allow Tunisians who have chosen to return to their country to build their capacity ahead of integration into the labor market. The agents of the Office of the Tunisians Abroad are present in several regions of the country so that the migrants can choose to stay in their city of origin.
The new project is part of a cooperation program of the European Union through the Progress Migration Tunisia program that is funded by the Emergency Trust Fund with the expertise France and the French Office of Immigration and Integration. The new migrant center will facilitate the implementation of the mechanism of social and economic reintegration of Tunisians returning home. According to the Social Affairs Department, 600 applications of people wishing to join the program have been examined so far. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, now on to some developing news. The Russian Emergencies Ministry says a passenger airplane with 28 people on board has crashed into the sea off the Kamchatka Peninsula in the country's far east. Well, Chinese President Xi Jinping has sent a message of condolences to his Philippine counterpart, Rodrigo Duterte, over the crash of a military transport airplane. Xi said that he was shocked to learn that the incident had caused heavy casualties On behalf of the Chinese government and people, she expressed condolences to victims and sympathy to the injured and bereaved families. Let's head over to Algeria now, where farmers are complaining of water scarcity, which they say is a result of severe desertification. Algeria is the largest country in North Africa and is 80% desert. The situation has posed food production challenges that sees Algeria spending billions of dollars in food imports. Here's CGTN's Wanja Mungai with more.
Farmers in Algeria decry a worsening climate disaster. In the Tazuz region, about 600 kilometers from the capital Algiers, water levels have gone so low that there is not enough for farmers like Aissa Ghazzoul.
Currently, we're experiencing an unprecedented water shortage. There is no water here. Every time we buy water tanks at exorbitant prices in order to save our agriculture. The water that we buy is just to keep them alive and that they don't die. And we are looking for yield. And believe me, it is very difficult. And we have never seen anything like this before.
Aissa has resorted to water harvesting to sustain his farming. For him, every drop counts. He has managed to harness a little that comes through rainfall and some from the underground. He believes that if anything should change, it trickles down to government intervention.
The solution, in my opinion, exists. It is easy and simple, and it is up to the Algerian state to dig artesian wells. And studies have shown that the region has a great wealth of water that awaits to be exploited to make this place a paradise on earth.
In the 1970s, late President Houari Boumediene started a reforestation project to combat desertification in the North African country, the Great Green Dam. However, in Aissa's opinion, it hasn't achieved much.
The Green Dam project and all other projects alone cannot stop desertification and combat drought. There must be a great practical plan that touches all parts of the country.
The largest country in North Africa struggles with food security, thus relying largely on imports. Algeria spent $2.8 billion on food imports in 2005, including $1.2 billion for cereals. Most of its water supply comes from underground. Experts and farmers believe, if well tapped, could go a long way in solving the crisis. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
Well, your sport news is coming up after the short break. Here's what you can expect. Brazil through to the Copa America final courtesy of a 1-0 win over Peru.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now for